Hi, this is Professor Lucien. This is lecture 10. I'm going to attempt to do another lecture without a PowerPoint to guide me. And so let's just follow through with this. This one is about personal protective equipment and the assessments that go along with it. So I'm going to try to bring you through what OSHA has for resources, some other things that I found, and then I'm going to refer to Granger Safety simply because I've had them come in and speak on this topic before, and I kind of like the resources that they have. So first, you have a link to this website, which is a personal protective equipment, and it gets into what is PPE, and specifically right away they talk about what is needed as far as figuring out when is it necessary, what kind is necessary, how to properly wear it and adjustment, limitations of the equipment or knowing when it needs to be replaced, proper care maintenance, all that stuff. Called out right away. You can go and look up standards, including the consensus standards. They've got hazards and solutions, which we'll go to in a moment, that employers are required to pay for the PPE if it's required. If it's voluntary, they just have to approve it. But in certain cases, they will give you an amount, and then you go to the vendor, or the vendor comes to the company, and you get to choose. And then you may have to put in extra money if you want a particular style or comfort level. So they'll pay for the minimum, but you pay for the extras, if you will. Under the standards, I just want to quickly show you what's available here through the OSHA website. It's pretty good. So they talk about the subparts. I taught you to use that to find things. And what is great is it's got the topic page. And you get to the PPE, that's what we're really for. It's got the directives topic page, the Federal Register notices, letters of interpretation, settlement agreements. So that's all here. Everything you need for PPE is, I believe, right here. I think it is anyway. General requirements. I kind of want to see. Okay, in a moment I'm going to go back to that. I kind of want to see what's there. Curious. So for the hazards and solutions, there's topic pages, there's fact sheets, e-tools for just eye and face protection and electrical. So probably like a NFPA 70E type stuff. More on managing PPE programs, training requirements, just for agriculture, just for emergency responders, and then some extra stuff. So I want to really quickly go back to the standards part, and I want to see what they have, because I understand that when you start talking about the requirement for doing a hazard assessment, which must be done, must be documented, I believe that they need to, there's a certain form, and I think Appendix B provides that. So is it going to let me see it? So this is the general, and you can definitely review the general. I sound like a commercial. As far as what it contains. Oh, it brought me all the way back. That's no good. Not as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. Usually they let you bounce around on certain things. Here we go. So under respiratory protection, personal fall arrest. Okay, so it doesn't have the assessment that I thought it had, just for fall protection and respiratory protection. So what I'd like to do is bring over, and in the last lecture, I shared with you one of the resulting citations of a mock OSHA audit, and it was all revolving around the need for assessment to determine which PPE to select, what its characteristics need to be as far as how they need to perform, and then you fill in the rest as far as what do workers need to be trained on, how to use, store, inspect, stuff like that. So I've got the language right here for 132D1. Employers shall assess the workplace to determine if hazards are present or likely to be present, which necessitate the use of PPE. Then it goes into the select and have the affected employee use the types of PPE to protect and the affected employee from hazards identified, communicate selection decisions, select PPE that appropriately fits. And then finally, the employer shall verify that the required workplace health hazard assessment has been performed through a written certification that identifies the workplace evaluated, the person certifying that the evaluation has been performed, and the dates of the hazard assessment. So that's everything that's required. I've got here an example, and this was just off of a Google picture or Google image. PPE Hazard Assessment Certificate. There's a lot of them out there. And actually, depending on who you purchase your equipment from, they may have an assessment form that they will provide to you, or they may actually complete it themselves. So and I provided you with something from Showa Glove, um, specifically on protecting from cutting hazards. They are the experts. And to bring in the expert to assess what exactly do we need? What design do we need? What other comfort things do we need? And they do the assessment and they sign off on it. And then you purchase their equipment that best suits it. That's the best bang for the buck, really. A laceration hazard can be, or injury can cost in like an upwards of $9,000 to $10,000, depending on what you're cutting. Small ones are just minor band-aids, but they can add up over time. So stitches are expensive, amputations are expensive, which is potential that, depending on what they're working with. So it's probably cost effective to bring in the experts. But if you want to do it yourself, you can find something online, but there are other resources too. So let me quickly go through these. So this is the fact sheet. So this is a very compressed, condensed version of what OSHA expects for personal protective equipment. So it talks about the employer responsibilities. It talks about protection from head injuries, foot and leg, protection from eye and face. These are all separate. Hearing loss, that's its own standard. That's 29 CFR 1910-95, which we will cover later in the semester. Hand injuries, protection, the body, so like a bodysuit or an apron. Respiratory protection is 29 CFR 1910-134. We will cover that again at the end of the semester. And then if you want additional information. So this is provided on Canvas. So are these two. Now these are a little bit longer. This is 48 pages and the JHA is 51. But if you really want to do it right, you want to do it yourself, these provide a lot more detail and description of what needs to be done. See, it's got the requirement for PPE on page 5. It's got the hazard assessment on page 6. But it's the pages here and not my PDF. Hazard assessment. So as you can see, it's not super complicated by any means. It's actually somewhat simple, but they kind of bring you through all the different areas that should be at least addressed. And it looks like you could add your own too, but then the identification of the workplace evaluated, name of the person conducting the assessment, the date, identification of document certifying completion of the hazard assessment. Those are the 4 things you really need as far as documentation. And then you get into the selection of it. And so it refers to consensus standards. In demonstrating how to use the OSHA website, I talked about what's required for eye and face protection. It's the ANSI Z87. It's got it on the stem of the eyewear. So this pretty much, training for employees, when it's necessary, what's necessary, how to properly put on, take off, adjust, wear, its limitations, proper care, maintenance, useful life, disposal of PPE, all the things you really need. So if a compliance officer sees somebody wearing, a protective eyewear or an apron or gloves, they should be able to go up and ask these questions. And the worker should be able to provide somewhat of an answer. And you need to have the documentation that they were taught. When were they taught? Who taught it to them? This is all the documentation you need. But in doing so, you're verifying that you're doing the right thing. And then it gets into the individual stuff. All really good. The JHA is just to provide a little bit more depth to the assessment you have to do. A JHA is very in-depth, and you don't have to go as in-depth as this document points out, but it's a great starting point. They got a sample form here. Should we go all the way to it on 46 and just take a quick look at it? So this could be used. So you could double up a sample job hazard analysis form with PPE. You just have to put in a little bit more information for what you're actually looking at. So great information on the website. You can also use somebody like Granger. They have a lot of great online material. So this is PPE Standards and Guidelines. And you can see, you can actually click and go to different parts. They've got information on the eye and face protection. They actually have quick tips just for specific applications. Talk about respiratory protection, head protection, foot protection, electrical protection, hand protection, and personal fall arrest. And then they go in, they talk about the general requirements, hazard assessment. Oh, and there's I missed that before. Oh, no, I didn't. I did have that. Okay. We'll go to their hazard assessment form. Gets into the training. If it's employee owned, the employer must verify it. Frequently asked questions. Isn't that cool? It's all right here. This is free. You can get at this stuff. You can contact them and ask them questions too. And they supply different brands, so they could also help you. So if you want a quick reference, here's the job hazard form that if you were to click on that one highlighted thing, gets introduction, it gives you reference to the materials, a guide for selecting PPE, can be found on the last 2 pages of this form. So for head hazards, you can click yes or no. They make it very simple, dichotomized it. Same here, eye and face, respiratory protection, hearing. I mean, for these two, you really need to do either air monitoring or noise monitoring. They don't really say that. It's a little concerning. But it's a very simple form. You see they got the signing of stuff, the date, who did it, guidelines for selecting, and it's got good information here. Yeah, so you could use something like this. The OSHA, I think that's an updated version of the booklet that I provided. I didn't know there was a newer one. So anyway, so you've got the OSHA resources and website. You've got Granger. I provided you with some good handouts. But all in all, that's really what's required for PPE. There has to be some documentation. You have to first determine what the issue is, what will be the best solution, communicate that to the worker, train the worker how to wear it, how to adjust it, make sure it's comfortable and it fits, and then how to know what its limitations are when it needs to be replaced or repaired or anything like that. And also realize that, again, PPE is considered the least reliable form of protection, though it tends to be the most cost-effective. So don't go for the cheapest pair of gloves, because as you'll see from the Show a Glove presentation, and I gave it to you in a PDF, those other gloves don't provide much more than some form of mild abrasion protection. If there's going to be working with knives or chemicals or anything like that, those gloves don't do much. So don't just take what's easiest off the shelf or the cheapest per dozen. Get what workers need, and the documentation should show that. So that's it. Again, the keyword, what did I say? What did I get? Appendix B? Let's do it Granger. Let's have the keyword be Granger. We'll see who watches all the way to the end.